I never thought of myself as a jealous man. Claire and I had been married for 9 years, and though we had our ups and downs, I believed we were solid. We had built a life together, a comfortable home in the suburbs, and shared our routines like clockwork. She worked as a marketing consultant, often from home, while I commuted to my accounting firm. Lately, though, something felt off. It started subtly. Claire had always been diligent about her work-from-home schedule. Mornings were filled with video calls, afternoons spent drafting proposals, and evenings reserved for us. But over the past month, I noticed odd changes. Meetings that she claimed were rescheduled or cancelled became more frequent. She became evasive when I asked how her day went, giving short, clipped responses. I chalked it up to stress at first. Everyone has rough patches. But when she started dressing up more than usual, even while working from home, my gut stirred. Claire had always been stylish, but she rarely put on makeup unless we were going out. Suddenly, she was doing her hair perfectly for a day of emails and spreadsheets. Then, last Friday, a small but glaring inconsistency presented itself. "I have a big client meeting at noon," she told me that morning, brushing her long auburn hair in the mirror. "I'll be on a call for a while, so don't call me unless it's an emergency." "Sounds important," I said, fastening my watch. "Who's the client?" She hesitated for a fraction of a second before smiling. "Oh, it's a potential one. Big company. I don't want to jinx it." It was such an innocent exchange, yet something gnawed at me. Claire wasn't the superstitious type. She thrived on preparation, data, and well-researched strategies. The way she dodged the name of the client sat uneasily in my mind all day. At lunch, I couldn't resist. I sent her a quick text, "Hope your meeting is going well." No response. An hour passed. Then another. Finally, at 2:30 p.m., she texted back, "Sorry, it ran long. Exhausted but good. Talk later." Again, it was subtle. But something didn't sit right. That evening, I asked her how it went. "Good," she said too quickly. "Really promising. What's the company's name again?" She blinked. "Oh, Jensen and Company. But it's still in the early stages." I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Later that night, curiosity got the better of me. I searched online for Jensen and Company in the marketing industry. Nothing came up. Not even a remote reference. Doubt sank in. Was I being paranoid? People mix up names, right? But then came Tuesday. Claire told me she'd be working from home all day. I had an early meeting, so I kissed her goodbye as she sat at her desk, sipping coffee. "See you later," she said cheerfully. At around noon, I received an email about a cancelled meeting, giving me an unexpected 2-hour break. I figured I'd surprise Claire with lunch. I picked up her favorite sushi from a nearby spot and drove home, expecting to find her in front of her laptop. Instead, the house was empty. I checked the kitchen. No coffee mug. No half-eaten snack. Her laptop was gone, too. A sinking feeling clenched my stomach. I called her phone. No answer. That was the moment the seed of suspicion took root in my chest, and I knew, deep down, I had to find out the truth. I stood in the empty house, my mind reeling. Claire was supposed to be here. She had been at her desk when I left this morning, sipping coffee, dressed comfortably for a day of working from home. But now, the silence pressed in around me, thick and suffocating. The absence of her presence was more than unusual. It was wrong. My first instinct was to call her again. I tapped her name on my phone. It rang once, twice, then straight to voicemail. "Hey, it's me. Just wanted to check in. Call me back when you get this." I ended the call and exhaled sharply. Maybe she had stepped out for lunch? No, that didn't make sense. Claire wasn't the type to leave without mentioning it, and she never ignored my calls. Something gnawed at the back of my mind, a quiet whisper that told me something wasn't adding up. I moved through the house, looking for any sign of where she had gone. In the kitchen, there was no used coffee cup, no half-eaten toast, no signs of her usual morning routine. I went to our bedroom. Her closet door was slightly ajar, and I noticed a few empty hangers. I opened the laundry hamper. Inside, I found the outfit she had been wearing earlier that morning. She had changed. My pulse quickened. Why would she change clothes in the middle of a workday? I checked her dresser, where she usually kept her jewelry. A pair of her nicer earrings were missing. Claire never wore those unless she was going somewhere special. I went to her desk in the home office. Her laptop was gone. That was the final piece that made my stomach clench. She never took her work laptop unless she had a meeting outside. But she had told me she would be home all day. The whisper in my mind turned into a scream. I sat at my desk and powered on my laptop. If she had a meeting, it would be in our shared calendar. I pulled it up. Nothing scheduled. I checked her email. It was open, but there were no recent messages that hinted at a meeting or client appointment. Everything seemed normal. Too normal. Then I checked her browser history. And my heart stopped. There it was, a hotel booking confirmation. The Hilton Garden Inn. Reserved from noon to 3 p.m. today. I stared at the screen, my breath shallow. My hands felt cold, my fingers numb. The room number was listed. I swallowed hard. This had to be a misunderstanding. Claire wasn't that kind of person. Maybe she had a business meeting at the hotel? Maybe it was innocent. I checked her text messages next. No messages confirmed any plans for today. But one detail stood out. Last night, she had deleted her most recent conversations. Claire never cleared her texts. My stomach churned. I grabbed my car keys. The drive to the Hilton Garden Inn took 20 minutes. It felt longer. My thoughts spun, playing every possible scenario in my mind. What if she really was meeting a client? What if I was wrong? But another thought loomed larger. What if I wasn't? When I arrived, I parked in the lot and sat there for a moment, gripping the wheel. My heartbeat thundered in my ears. I didn't know what I would do if my worst fear was confirmed. I got out and walked through the automatic doors into the cool, sterile air of the hotel lobby. A young woman at the front desk greeted me with a polite smile. "Hi," I said, forcing my voice to stay steady. "I'm supposed to meet my wife here, but I forgot the room number." "Claire Matthews." She hesitated, then typed something into her computer. "Room 214, she said. I nodded. "Thanks." I turned toward the elevators, my legs feeling heavy. Every step toward the second floor felt like walking through quicksand. Room 214. I stopped in front of the door. The number gleamed under the dim hallway lights. My breath came in short bursts. My fingers hovered over the doorknob. Then, from inside, I heard a sound that shattered me. Laughter. Claire's laughter. And a man's voice. My chest tightened. My vision blurred at the edges. The worst possible truth had just been confirmed. I knocked. The laughter stopped. A pause. Then Claire's voice, muffled but unmistakably tense. "Just a second." I clenched my fists. The door opened. Claire stood there, eyes wide, her face frozen in shock. Her hair was styled, her makeup flawless, her blouse slightly rumpled as if she had hurried to fix herself. Behind her, a man stood near the bed, shirt unbuttoned, his face turning pale. No words were spoken in those first few seconds. Just silence. The kind of silence that changes everything. The silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Claire stood frozen in the doorway, her hand gripping the knob so tightly that her knuckles turned white. Her eyes, wide with shock and panic, darted between me and the man behind her. I had imagined this moment 1,000 different ways during my drive here, how she might react, what she might say, but nothing could have prepared me for the way my heart felt like it had been ripped from my chest. "Ethan," she finally whispered, her voice barely audible. I swallowed the lump in my throat, forcing myself to look past her. The man standing behind her was younger than me, probably early 30s. Dark hair, sharp features, an expensive-looking watch on his wrist. His dress shirt hung open at the collar, as if he had thrown it on in a hurry. He said nothing. I shifted my gaze back to Claire. My wife. The woman I had loved for 9 years. The woman who had just been in a hotel room with another man. The rage bubbled up inside me, hot and violent, but I forced myself to stay calm. If I let my emotions take over, I wouldn't get the answers I needed. "Are you going to invite me in?" I asked, my voice deceptively even, Or should we have this conversation out in the hallway? Claire blinked rapidly, as if trying to process my words. She hesitated for a moment before stepping aside. I walked in, my legs feeling like they belonged to someone else. The air in the room was thick with a scent I knew all too well, her perfume mixed with something musky, something foreign. The bed was unmade. The sheets rumpled. I clenched my jaw. The man, whoever he was, shifted uncomfortably but still didn't speak. Claire finally closed the door and turned to face me, arms wrapped around herself like she was trying to shrink. "Ethan, don't," I cut her off. My voice was low, steady, but I could feel my control slipping. "Don't insult me with an excuse. I want the truth." She inhaled sharply. I could see the battle waging inside her, the desperate search for something, anything that might soften the blow. But there was nothing that could undo this. Still, she tried. "It's not what it looks like." I let out a hollow laugh, my eyes flashing toward the bed. "Really? Because it looks like you booked a hotel room during work hours and had sex with another man." She flinched at my bluntness, but I didn't care. She didn't get to be the victim here. The man finally spoke. "Maybe we should all calm down." I turned to him so fast he actually took a step back. "Shut the hell up," I snapped. "You don't get to have an opinion here." He raised his hand slightly, as if to say he wasn't looking for trouble, but I was too far gone to care about his discomfort. I turned back to Claire. "How long?" She shook her head, her lower lip trembling. "Ethan, please." "How long?" I demanded. My voice cracked, but I didn't care. She hesitated. That single second of hesitation was all the confirmation I needed that this wasn't some one-time mistake. I took a step back, shaking my head. "Jesus Christ." Claire reached out toward me, but I jerked away before she could touch me. "Ethan, I never meant for you to find out like this." I laughed again, the sound bitter. "Oh, so what? You meant for me to never find out at all?" "That was the plan." She swallowed hard, saying nothing. I turned back to the man. "Who are you?" He hesitated before finally answering. "Jason." "That's supposed to mean something to me?" His jaw tensed. "I work with Claire." Of course, he did. I looked back at Claire, my stomach twisting with disgust. "So, this is what? A workplace romance? A little afternoon getaway while your husband is too busy to notice?" She didn't respond. My hands curled into fists. "How long, Claire?" She exhaled shakily. "Almost a year." The words hit me like a sledgehammer to the chest. A year. 12 months of lies. 12 months of pretending. 12 months of looking me in the eyes every single day and making me believe I was the only one. I turned away, staring out the window. The city skyline blurred as my vision clouded with anger, pain, betrayal. "You were going to keep lying to me forever, weren't you?" I said after a moment, my voice quiet now. "Empty." "You weren't going to stop. You weren't going to tell me. You were just going to let me keep loving you while you snuck around behind my back." Claire's breath hitched. "Ethan, I love you." I spun around, eyes blazing. "Don't you dare say that to me." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't bring myself to feel sympathy. Jason cleared his throat awkwardly. "Maybe I should go." I turned to him, my expression cold. "You should have gone a long time ago." He nodded, grabbing his jacket from the chair before making his way toward the door. He paused for a moment, as if debating whether to say something else, but ultimately decided against it. He walked out, shutting the door behind him. Silence filled the room once more. Claire was crying now, silent tears rolling down her cheeks. I watched her for a long moment, feeling like I was looking at a stranger. "I don't even know who you are anymore," I said finally. She sniffled. "Ethan, please, we can talk about this." I let out a breath, my body suddenly feeling heavy. "No, we can't." I turned toward the door, ready to leave, but something in me needed one last answer. I stopped and looked back at her. "Why?" My voice cracked slightly. "Why wasn't I enough?" She sobbed harder, covering her mouth with her hand. "I don't know," she whispered. "I don't know." I nodded slowly. That was the worst part of all. She didn't even have a reason. I turned and walked out of the room, closing the door behind me. And just like that, everything I had ever known was gone. The walk back to my car felt surreal, like I was moving through a fog. The sounds of the city, cars honking, distant conversations, the hum of life, seemed muffled, as if I were trapped underwater. I reached my car, gripping the handle, but I hesitated before opening it. My reflection stared back at me from the window. My face was pale, my eyes hollow. I looked like a man who had just been gutted. Because I had been. I got in, slammed the door shut, and gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. My breath came in short bursts. My entire body trembled with the effort of keeping myself together. A year. Claire had been with him for a year. My stomach twisted violently. I thought I might be sick. I closed my eyes, trying to steady my breathing, but all I could see was her face. The way her lips had parted in shock when she saw me at the door. The way she had stood there, caught between me and him, as if she couldn't decide who to protect. I should have screamed at her. I should have broken something. I should have done something. But instead, I had walked away. I pulled out my phone and stared at the screen. A single notification blinked back at me, a missed call from Claire. I ignored it. Instead, I opened my messages and typed out a text to her. My fingers felt numb as I wrote the words that would change everything. Me, don't come home tonight. I hit send. The moment the message delivered, my phone vibrated again. Another call from Claire. I let it ring. Then another. And another. Finally, I turned the phone off and threw it onto the passenger seat. I started the car, my hands still shaking, and pulled out of the hotel parking lot. I had no idea where I was going. I couldn't go home, not to the house we had built together, the bed she had slept in while lying to me every single day. Instead, I just drove. The city blurred past me as I made my way to the only place that made sense, the bar near my office. It was a dimly lit hole in the wall, the kind of place where people went to disappear. I had never been much of a drinker, but tonight, I needed something to dull the edges of my reality. I parked and walked inside, sliding onto a stool at the bar. The bartender, a guy in his 50s with tired eyes, glanced at me. "What'll it be?" "Whiskey," I said. "Neat." He nodded and poured the amber liquid into a glass, setting it in front of me. I stared at it for a moment before taking a slow sip. The burn spread through my chest, but it didn't numb the pain. Nothing could. I exhaled shakily, running a hand down my face. My wedding ring caught the dim light, and the sight of it made my stomach churn. I twisted it off and placed it on the bar in front of me. It felt like a lead weight. A voice pulled me from my thoughts. "Rough night." I turned my head slightly. A woman sat a few seats away, swirling a glass of wine in her hand. She was in her late 30s, dark hair, sharp eyes. I let out a humorless laugh. "You could say that." She studied me for a moment. "Let me guess, wife trouble?" I didn't answer. That was answer enough. She nodded knowingly. "Men don't come here alone on a weeknight unless something went to hell." I took another sip of whiskey, staring at my ring. "Yeah, something like that." She didn't press for more details, and I was grateful. I wasn't ready to talk about it, not yet. The bartender came back, refilling my glass without a word. I had no idea how long I sat there, drinking in silence, letting the alcohol numb me just enough to keep from falling apart. But eventually, the weight of everything became too much. I needed air. I grabbed my ring and stuffed it into my pocket before tossing some bills onto the counter. I stumbled out of the bar, the cold night air hitting me like a slap. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. Then, before I could stop myself, I pulled out my phone and turned it back on. The moment it powered up, it vibrated non-stop with missed calls and texts from Claire. "Claire, Ethan, please talk to me." "Claire, I'm sorry. Please, just come home." "Claire, I need to explain." "Claire, I love you." The words made my chest tighten. Love. Love. She had spent a year betraying me, and she still had the audacity to say she loved me? My fingers hovered over the screen. Part of me wanted to reply, to demand answers. to scream at her, make her feel even an ounce of the pain she had put me through. But another part of me, the broken part, knew that nothing she said would change what had happened. Instead of responding, I called the only person I could trust right now. My best friend, Jake. He answered on the second ring. "Ethan." His voice was groggy. He must have been asleep. "What's up?" I took a deep breath, my throat tightening. "I need a place to crash." Jake didn't hesitate. "Come over. I'll unlock the door." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Thanks, man." I hung up and got back in my car, driving toward Jake's apartment. I had no idea what I was going to do next. All I knew was that I couldn't go home. Not yet. Maybe not ever. By the time I reached Jake's place, exhaustion had settled into my bones. He was waiting at the door, dressed in sweatpants and an old hoodie. The moment he saw my face, his expression darkened. "Jesus," he muttered. "What happened?" I stepped inside, running a hand through my hair. "She cheated," I said. The words felt foreign, like they belonged to someone else. But they were mine. This was my reality now. Jake swore under his breath. "Claire." I nodded. He exhaled sharply, rubbing a hand over his jaw. "Man, I'm so sorry." I swallowed hard, shaking my head. "I don't know what to do." Jake clapped a hand on my shoulder. "First thing you do. You sleep. You can figure out the rest tomorrow." I didn't argue. I was too tired. As I lay on his couch, staring at the ceiling, the reality of everything crashed down on me. My marriage was in ruins. My trust, shattered. My entire life, ripped apart by the person I had loved the most. I closed my eyes, but I knew sleep wouldn't come easily. Because tomorrow, I would have to face what came next. And I had no idea where to begin. I woke up to the sound of my phone vibrating on the coffee table. For a moment, I didn't recognize where I was. The dim light filtering through the blinds cast long shadows across the room, and the couch beneath me was unfamiliar. Then it hit me, I was at Jake's apartment. Everything from yesterday came crashing down like a tidal wave. The hotel. Claire. Jason. The confession. I reached for my phone, squinting at the screen. Claire. Another call. I let it ring. Jake emerged from his bedroom, stretching and yawning. His hair was a mess, and he had the look of someone who hadn't gotten much sleep. He took one look at me and sighed. "Did you sleep at all?" I shook my head. "Not really." He walked over to the kitchen and started making coffee. I figured. "You looked like hell when you got here. Still do, by the way." I rubbed my face, trying to shake off the exhaustion. "Thanks for the pep talk." He poured 2 cups and handed me one. "So, what's the plan?" I stared at the coffee, my stomach twisting. "I don't know." Jake sat down across from me. "Are you gonna talk to her?" I hesitated. "I don't know if I can." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, I get that." He took a sip of his coffee before setting the mug down. "But you're gonna have to, man. At some point." I exhaled sharply. I knew he was right. I couldn't just ignore Claire forever. I needed answers. I picked up my phone, my hands tightening around it. I had over a dozen missed calls and even more texts from her. The most recent one read, "Claire, please, Ethan. Come home. We need to talk." I stared at the words for a long moment before locking my phone and setting it down. Jake studied me. "You don't have to decide anything today. But you should at least hear her out." I wasn't sure I agreed. What was there to hear? She had already told me the most important part. She had cheated. For a year. What else mattered? Still, the thought of leaving things in limbo didn't sit right with me either. I had to face her eventually. By mid-afternoon, I finally forced myself to leave Jake's apartment. The drive home felt longer than usual, like every mile was stretching out the time before I had to see Claire again. When I pulled into the driveway, I noticed her car was still there. My chest tightened. I stepped out and walked up to the front door. My key felt heavy in my hand as I unlocked it. The moment I stepped inside, Claire appeared from the kitchen. She looked terrible. Her eyes were swollen, her hair messy, and she was still wearing the same clothes from yesterday. She had been waiting. "Ethan," she breathed, taking a hesitant step forward. I held up a hand. "Don't." She stopped in her tracks, her lips parting slightly. I shut the door behind me and leaned against it. My heart was pounding, but I forced myself to keep my expression neutral. "Talk," I said finally. Claire exhaled shakily, wiping at her eyes. "I know you hate me right now. I don't blame you." I didn't respond. She swallowed hard. "But I need you to know that I never wanted to hurt you." A bitter laugh escaped me before I could stop it. "Really? Because you did a damn good job of it." She winced but nodded. "I know. And she took a deep breath. "I don't expect you to forgive me. Ever. But I need you to understand why it happened." I crossed my arms. "Go ahead, then. Enlighten me." Claire hesitated for a moment, like she was gathering the courage to say the words. Finally, she spoke. "It started last year," she said quietly. "At first, it was just harmless. Jason and I worked on a project together, and we got along well. We would talk about work, about life, about things that had nothing to do with this." I clenched my jaw. When did it stop being harmless? She swallowed. "A few months in." I felt sick. "So you were sleeping with him for months before you even thought to stop?" Claire flinched. "I didn't plan for it to happen. It wasn't like I woke up one day and decided to betray you." I shook my head, letting out a hollow laugh. "You think that makes it better?" "No," she whispered. "I know it doesn't." I ran a hand through my hair, pacing the living room. "Why, Claire? Why wasn't I enough?" Tears welled in her eyes again. "It wasn't about you not being enough. Then what the hell was it about?" She exhaled shakily. I felt lost, like I was just going through the motions. Work, home, work, home. I wasn't happy, Ethan. And I know that's not an excuse, but I started looking for something that made me feel alive. I stared at her, my stomach churning. "And you found that with him?" She nodded slowly. I let out a breath, shaking my head. "You could have talked to me, Claire. You could have told me you were unhappy instead of sneaking around for a year." She wiped at her eyes. "I know. And I regret it more than you'll ever know." I turned away, running a hand over my face. My heart felt like it was being ripped apart all over again. "I love you, Ethan," she said softly. I closed my eyes. "You don't get to say that." Silence filled the room. Finally, she whispered, "Do you want a divorce?" The question hung between us, suffocating. I didn't know the answer. I had spent years building a life with Claire, years trusting her, loving her. Could I throw it all away because of this? Or was there something still worth saving? I turned to face her, my chest tightening. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded slowly, her lips trembling. "What do you need from me?" I hesitated before responding. "Space." She exhaled, blinking back tears. "Okay." I turned toward the stairs, my body heavy with exhaustion. I needed time. Time to process, to decide if there was anything left between us. Because right now all I could feel was pain. The days that followed were filled with silence. Claire and I barely spoke. When we did, it was brief, mechanical. We moved around each other like strangers, sharing the same house but not the same life. I spent most of my time at work or at Jake's place, avoiding the emptiness that had taken over our home. Claire, to her credit, didn't push. She gave me space like I had asked, though I could see the pain in her eyes every time we crossed paths. I didn't know what I wanted. I didn't know if I could ever forgive her. But I also didn't know if I was ready to let go. Then, on a cold Friday evening, 5 days after I had walked into that hotel, I found myself standing in front of Claire in our living room. She looked up at me, startled. "Ethan." I swallowed hard. "We need to talk." She nodded quickly, setting aside the book she had been pretending to read. I took a deep breath, steadying myself. "I've been thinking a lot about everything. About what you did. About us." She clasped her hands together, waiting. I hesitated before continuing. I still love you, Claire. The words felt strange coming out of my mouth, but they were true. Even after all the pain, the betrayal, I still loved her. Tears welled in her eyes, but I wasn't done. But love isn't enough, I said, my voice thick. Not after this. Her face crumpled. Ethan. I shook my head. I've spent the past few days trying to convince myself that we can fix this. That if we try hard enough, maybe we can find a way back. She wiped at her tears. We can. We can go to therapy, we can rebuild. But I'll never be able to trust you again, I interrupted. And without trust, what do we have? Claire let out a shaky breath, her body trembling. I don't want to lose you. I closed my eyes for a brief moment before meeting her gaze again. You lost me the moment you chose him. The words hit like a hammer. She let out a small, broken sob, covering her mouth with her hands. I wanted to comfort her. I wanted to hold her. But I couldn't. Because this was the end. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my wedding ring. I had taken it off days ago, but I had held on to it, unsure of what to do. Now I knew. I placed it on the coffee table between us. I'm filing for divorce. Claire let out a choked sob, but she didn't argue. She knew it was over. She knew she had destroyed us. I turned and walked away, my heart breaking with every step. As I reached the door, I heard her whisper one last time, I'm sorry. I didn't look back. I stepped outside, the cold air biting at my skin. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. And though it hurt more than anything, I knew I had made the right choice. Because some things, no matter how much you love them, aren't meant to be saved.